All right, we want to welcome you to another session of HeroMaker, and this is actually, we're going to talk about the third practice of leaders that multiply leaders. And the third hero-making practice is disciple multiplying. One of the things I'll sometimes have groups do when we talk about this is actually have them put their hand on their heart. I don't know if you want to do that or not. Maybe it'll help you remember, but this has to do with sharing. It's a different way of sharing. And while heroes share what you know to help others follow Jesus, and that's good, hero makers share their life and they invest in the development of leaders who will invest in the development of leaders up to the fourth generation. It's a big, big difference. And this is exactly what we see in the life of Jesus again. Jesus spent 3 years with primarily 12 people. Now, I want you to just think about this. Think about the ministry of Jesus. Now, and when you think about the ministry of Jesus and everything you've ever read in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the Gospels, do you picture him speaking to crowds, doing the Sermon on the Mount, feeding 5,000, kind of big groups? Or do you think about him spending time with the 12? If you do the research on the Gospels, and we did the homework on this, 3/4 of his emphasis was on training the 12. And if you actually calculate the whole thing, from the time he told them to go out and multiply in Matthew 4:19 until his death, 73%, check this out, 73% of his time was with the 12. You got 46 events in the Gospels. That's with the few, compared to 17 events with the masses. It's almost like 3-1. And I think we can learn something ourselves. There's a verse in John chapter 3, and you've probably read this, but chances are, if you're like me, maybe just kind of skimmed right over it, thinking there's not much there. But it's in verse 22, and it says this: After this, Jesus and his disciples went out to the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them. Now, the word spend time is actually a Greek word that's pronounced diatribo. And it's like this composite word, diatribo. Dia, which means against, and tribo, which means to rub. And so when you put them together, diatribo literally means to rub against. And it actually kind of has the idea that Jesus spent some time rubbing off on them. Just rubbing off on them. And here's the point of Jesus' ministry and his emphasis and why he spent 3/4 of his time with the few, so that they could do greater things. That was the goal, right? These guys are going to do greater things. I'm working this. We're going to get this movement accomplished, this mission accomplished through them. And the way to do it is just by spending time rubbing off on them. One of a great contemporary kind of example is actually in the parachurch world through MOPS. A lady by the name of Pat Runyon, a mom, was a hero maker. She pulled together 7 other older women in her home who had a big heart for their community and to meet the needs of young mothers. And they just began to diatribo with other young mothers. And if you fast forward years later now, through their own disciple multiplication, they have a movement of more than 25,000 volunteers, 4,000 groups that's now gone to 30 countries around the world and growing. All right, so how do you do this? How do you do this simple thing of kind of diatribo, of kind of a disciple multiplying? Well, a simple tool that we've used for years, I've used for years, is what we just call the 5 steps of apprenticeship. And here's how it works. Let me give you the 5 steps. Step number 1, I do, you watch, we talk. Now, for example, if it was a small group, it would mean like me leading the small group. I'd have an apprentice who I'm diatribo, I'm rubbing off on them. But what I ask them to do, first of all, you just watch, you just observe. And then we get together afterwards and talk. And basically we talk around 3 questions. What worked, what didn't work, and how can we improve? So that's step number 1. Then you have step number 2, which is I do, you help, we talk. And this is where I might give my apprentice the opportunity for some small part of, hey, why don't you lead the icebreaker this time? You do the icebreaker if it's a small group apprenticeship. And then we get together afterwards and talk. And we ask what worked, what didn't work, how can we improve? So that's step 1 and step 2 of the 5 steps of apprenticeship. Step 3 then is I turn to my apprentice, and there's a little shift here. I said, now you do, I help, and we talk. And I might even say, well, how about if I handle the icebreaker and I'll do the prayer time at the end, but then you lead the whole of the Bible discussion. And so pretty much they're leading the whole thing now, and I get to observe them. And you can see I'm slowly releasing responsibility to this new and developing leader. And then that sets us up for the 4th of 5 steps. And the 4th step is I say to my apprentice, now you do, I'm going to watch, and then we're going to talk. And now we're almost complete. The apprentice does everything. I'm observing them to see if they got it down. And now they're almost ready to start leading. Now, how do I know when they're ready to lead? I suggest don't overcomplicate this thing. When the apprentice thinks they're ready, and I think they're ready, if we both think they're ready, they're ready. It's as simple as that. And that's when you go to step 5 of the 5 steps of apprenticeship. And I tell my apprentice, okay, now you do, and you have someone else watch. And at that point, they go and start their own group, or they take over this group, and they bring on another apprentice, and I go start another group, or stay in that existing group and bring on another apprentice of my own. And I'm telling you, here's the thing about the 5 steps. And some of you may be kind of even rolling your eyes going, oh, good grief, I've heard that a million times. That might be true. Okay, can I push on you a little bit? Can I get in your grill a little bit? That might be true, but let me ask you this question. How many times have you actually done it? How many times have you actually gone through that kind of a process with somebody where you're rubbing off on them and you're really applying this idea of disciple multiplication, disciple multiplying? See, the problem is not about knowing it. The problem is about doing it. Let me tell you a story about a buddy of mine named Doug, who kind of got coerced into going to a small group by his wife. I think if you asked him at the time, he'd say, I'm not really interested in hand-holding and singing Kumbaya with a bunch of strangers. But his wife got him to join a group with, it was around the topic of parenting. And he wanted to be a good dad, so he was up for that. And over time, then we kind of became friends. Now, I didn't have an apprentice. And so I remember I asked Doug, hey, would you be my apprentice leader? And he's a big guy, and I remember just kind of beads of sweat up on his bald head and kind of freaking out about it. And he's finally like, okay, he says yes. And I remember the first time we met at Starbucks. We'd meet at Starbucks at Tuesday around 5 o'clock. And kind of doing the whole we talk part of the 5 steps. And I remember him saying, so if I'm going to be your apprentice, I suppose I should read the Bible, right? I said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. He said, so how does that work? And so one of the first things I showed him how that works. And I'm rubbing off on him. And basically we went through those 5 steps over the next, I think it was 12 or 14 months. And every Tuesday around 5 o'clock, we meet at Starbucks, and it's diatribo. I'm rubbing off on him. Well, at the end of that apprenticeship, somewhere around 12 or 14 months, when he thought he was ready and I thought he was ready, I turned the group over to him, and I went to lead a brand new group. It was 2 weeks later that I showed up at Starbucks on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And guess who was sitting at the same table that we always sat at? Maybe you're ahead of me. It was Doug and his brand new apprentice, a guy named Brad. Now, I don't know. I'm sure I told him he needed to have an apprentice. But I think what really happened, it was like diatribo. It just rubbed off. He kind of thought that's what everybody does. That's what every church does. Everybody multiplies disciples. See, this disciple multiplying, okay, this third practice of a hero maker, this one is the most crucial. You got to get this one right. Because if we get this one right, I think the others kind of fall into place. And it's key to being a hero maker. All right? So those are the first 3 of those practices. Looking forward to sharing the 4th one with you.